Okay. So I'll try not to. I'll try to just sort of blaze through this as quickly as I can. So basically, I'm just going to try and give you a quick update on where things are with the Jakarta EE delivery. There's a lot of activity. If you're subscribed to any mailing lists or watching any GitHub projects, I'm sure you've seen, you know, some smattering of discourse going back and forth. It certainly has ramped up in the past several weeks, so it's great to see all that progress. Just to sort of get us back to where we were last month, right? The deliverables for Jakarta EE haven't changed at all, right? We're still planning to deliver a complete set of Jakarta EE specifications, and these will each consist of a specification document. I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. A new API release, which is programmatically will be unchanged from what we did with the Java EE8 release. It will include a new TCK, so it's a new API that's licensed under Eclipse EPL and using all the Eclipse development process. We'll have TCKs that are where we have produced to essentially make the same collection of tests that we used in Java EE releases, but now they're testing for compatibility with Jakarta EE, and we're essentially introducing this new component, this new idea about what's called a compatible implementation. And so in that, again, I'll talk a little, I think I'll talk a little bit about that in a following slide. So the specification process, this is following the Eclipse Foundation specification process. You might see that as abbreviated EFSP, Eclipse Foundation, yeah. And one thing is there's a brand new version that was just ratified and I think it's posted on the Eclipse Specifications project. And then along with that, we've also done a rev on the Jakarta EE specification process. So the way Eclipse makes this work is there's a sort of a master process. It's the Eclipse Foundation specification process. And then there's then each specification project can add their own sort of special nuances to the overall process. All right, so we've just ratified a new version of that. I don't think it wasn't posted yesterday. It's probably going to be put up real soon. But I put a link in it. Both of these links have not changed from what they were before. I have them in a web page, but you know, in the interest of time, I'll just sort of skip that for now. And I think the main thing, at least as the sort of you know, worried about trying to get this out on time, the main thing that's updated in the new Jakarta EE specification is we've dropped the minimum ballot period from 30 days to 2 weeks. So that should give us a little bit of breathing time on this project. Okay, so the specifications, our goal is if you have a Java EE8 implementation, you should be able to just unpack the new TCKs and run them in exactly the same way you ran them before, and you should be able to achieve a compatibility, compatibility test output that matches what you had in Java EE8. That's a key goal of this release. Let's see, we have finished revising all of the specification projects. So now if you go and look at the specifications, oh great, that's going to open on the wrong window. So all right, hang on. So when you look at the EE4J top level project page, over here on the right side, you see a whole bunch of many projects are here. A lot of them has changed names, and essentially everything that starts with Jakarta is now, I think that's a pretty good metric here, is now an API specification project, and these all constitute the sort of the collection of Jakarta EE APIs. They are, and every one of them is staged, poised, and ready for a release that's gonna come up, and our target date is still the same, September 10th, right? In these slides, and I'll put the, I'll post these to the same place we had posted them last month. We will be creating ballot submissions. The intent is to use the GitHub pull requests as a way of submitting them and then tracking the approvals. And I listed a couple of I list a couple of these pull requests here just so we, so if you want to, if you're interested in sort of voyeurism and you just want to watch these projects, you could just watch this project, Jakarta EE /specifications. Just look for pull requests. And over time, you'll see more and more of the specifications themselves show up here, and you can actually open any one of these, and each of them has this nice collection of checkboxes. All of those need to be satisfied, and when they're all checked off, I believe that means that specification has been approved. We have I mentioned the Jakarta EE TCKs. So from a test perspective, these are identical to what used to be licensed to Java EE licensees, and those TCKs are all running right now. We have essentially the same level of operational, reliability as we had with Java EE, except that they're now all open sourced, and you could download the test versions. They're available right now, or you can once they're approved as part of the specification process, there'll be a Eclipse Foundation specification license version for people that want to use the, to seek an official Jakarta EE branding. Sorry, I'm not running my computer correctly. All right, so we've done a lot with the TCK setup. Many of the API projects are busy incorporating TCK test jobs directly into their Jakarta EE processes. I've listed a couple of the pull requests that people are using to sort of document how these things are integrated. Jan Sepol out of our Prague office has been instrumental in trying to get these set up. I think we've got Pyaris created several of these running in projects that they're leaders on. IBM has created several of these that they're running lead on. And I don't mean, if I didn't mention your organization, that doesn't mean anything. It's just those were the two that I could think of right away. So if you want to watch things, right, I would say start with github.com, the main project, and pick an API project that you're interested in, and use the GitHub watch button. There's an awful lot of back and forth discussion that goes along that's associated with the pull requests and with issues. There's a giant collection of mailing lists that are available from Eclipse. The thing is that the data from those two don't really intermingle. So if you want the full view, you may need to subscribe to both for the projects that you're interested in, and then you want to watch these PRs, pull requests to the GitHub Jakarta EE specifications project. That's where you'll see the specifications flowing in. All right, and I'm now at my deadline. So just continue to remind people, if if you are interested in contributing to Jakarta EE, you don't need to be a developer. There's an awful lot of writing level things, right? We still have to get websites created for most of these projects. We have a template and a mechanism in place for rolling up all of the websites, but we do need people that have some skills with setting up websites and maybe can either write text for them or maybe can write them, can put them into markdown flavored pages. We can certainly use help for all of that. The set of steps for joining up a project is the same as it was, as it's been, I think, with Eclipse for years, right? Anyone can subscribe to the mailing list. You can always follow all the projects and the activity that's going on. You don't have to have anything to follow GitHub projects except a GitHub ID. If you want to make a commit or submit a PR, you do need to create an Eclipse account, and you'll also need an Eclipse account if you want to get email. So I see there was some stuff in chat. I didn't have time to read it, but I think that's all that's all the slides I have. Any questions about that? I'm sorry, it was kind of a whirlwind.
No, that was great, Ed. I don't see any questions in chat relevant to the presentation that you made. So if you want to have some questions now, or maybe we have enough time at the end of all the presentations for questions from the audience.
So for developers, people that are working on the contributions, I think the crucial thing to to understand is it may seem like some of the delivery requirements are kind of arduous, or how can we get them done, but we're seeing a lot of evidence that it's straightforward enough to create all the documents that are required. I think I mentioned earlier something about the specification documents. In this initial round, we're basically just relying on the collection of a sort of a framing document, which it's replacing what used to be the detailed specification, and then a reference to the specification itself will include the Java docs. So the APIs, the details about how to use the APIs will be only in the Java docs in this release, and in subsequent releases we will start to be able to bring forward the detailed specification documents that we had in previous releases. That it's taking that securing all of the permissions and legalese for the text from all those previous specifications has turned out to be a little more challenging than we anticipated. So specifications has turned out to be a little more challenging than we it's not available. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ed.
Sure.
Scott, are you around?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Can you see your screen?
Yep, we can, thank you.
Okay, so just giving a quick update on what the specification committee has been up to the past, or since our last call, the past month. And primarily the focus has been on defining the TCK process, updating or filling out a Jakarta EE specification process guide and operation of the spec committee, and then focus on what does that actually imply for API projects in the Jakarta EE release. So we'll take a quick look at those three things. So we just last week we released the initial version 1 of the TCK process and announced it to the specification leads list. You can find that document here in the public drive of the specification committee. The highlights were that we defined the materials for a TCK release, which Ed talked about in his presentation. We defined a process to challenge TCK tests, and then we defined a process to define or to claim compatibility for certified implementations. In the JES Ops Guide, we also made that initial draft version. It's not finalized, but it has most of the content that you need to move forward last week as well. Again, announced on the spec lead list, and the link is here. The highlights that we defined a number of the operations of the spec committee in terms of votes and how reviews, spec release reviews were done, and in particular, what that meant from the perspective of a specification project and what it needed to do, you know, in terms of the actual details. And there's a one-page wiki that tries to collapse all that information together that's listed here about how to prepare API projects. Should be actually 4 Jakarta EE releases. That's been updated to reflect those changes in the TCK and JES Ops Guide. It's a living document that we've been updating pretty much on a daily basis as projects are going through this process, and we're, you know, discussing issues that are run into on the spec leads and platform development mailing lists. If you have questions about that, then definitely get on the spec leads list and send those in. Or if you're not a lead and you still have a question because you're involved in the project, probably send it to either get your lead to do it or send it to the public spec committee list. And that's pretty much what we've accomplished so far.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have David around? Yeah, I can see David here.
Yeah, we're burning through our agenda pretty quickly here, huh?
Yeah, I know.
This is unheard of. We might actually be able to talk to people during these calls.
I know.
Okay, good thing I'm a little long-winded, I guess. Let me see if I can go ahead and share. All right, does everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so the Jakarta EE to javax transition conversation has largely died down in the community, but I do think there's an important aspect that we're missing in the conversation because we've become, focused on big bang versus incremental. But it's important to remember that in the definition of big bang, there is still the option for us not to move everything, and there are really good reasons to do that. And that's an important conversation to have. That comes for free in the incremental perspective, but if you have a big bang mindset, you still need to keep in mind some aspects that people have that are issues that we can address by not moving everything. One is that, we know there's a cost to legacy. Right? There's a lot of stuff that people don't even know about that they don't use. And the quote, "I don't need that," is a very big thing that people like to throw at Java EE, now Jakarta EE. So, just because something is there, do we need to actually refresh it and move it into the Jakarta namespace, or is it fine living forever the rest of its days in JavaX? The other aspect is size. People will often say things like Java EE is too big. This is our opportunity to address that kind of concept, and maybe some things just stay where they are. And the other important thing to remember is that just because we don't move it to Jakarta doesn't mean it's dead. It means we just don't see any reason that it needs to evolve, and it can continue to run just fine under JavaX. And so just because something doesn't move doesn't mean you can't use it anymore. It means you're not going to have to invest in actually updating that code if it's old and fine and doesn't need to be messed with. So to make this kind of a more pragmatic conversation, I just wanted to highlight 4 specifications that make this the necessity for this conversation far more obvious. Okay, so the first one is javax Enterprise Deploy. It's a package. It was created in 2000. It was proposed in 2000 and released in 2002, and it never moved beyond 1.0. Okay, its point was to try and create a standard way to deploy into a Java EE platform, and it never really took off beyond its usage in the TCK itself. It doesn't support any kind of, no cloud platforms support this. It's not used in any modern way. A modern perspective of this concept of doing a standardized deployment API would involve some REST API, and it definitely would not look like the javax Enterprise Deploy package. The second aspect of it is it occupies a namespace that is largely, where CDI lives. Everything CDI lives under javax Enterprise, and there is javax Enterprise Deploy sitting there in with CDI going, hey, you don't mind if I squat here for a while? The question is, do we want to move this specification from javax Enterprise into Jakarta Enterprise and still have it sitting there grabbing some land from CDI and the concurrency utilities, which is also under javax Enterprise concurrency? So, that's an important aspect of the conversation. If we were to do an actual enterprise deploy API, we would want support from cloud vendors. We would want to do it fresh. And if we move this legacy API into Jakarta Enterprise Deploy, what package would we use for the newer API? And how would we explain the difference to people? Well, the Jakarta Enterprise Deploy is all legacy, but the Jakarta Enterprise Even Better package is the one you should be using. How do we tell people this? Another aspect of it is javax Management J2EE. This is JSR 77, proposed in 2000 and released in 2003. Not updated for 13 years, not even a maintenance revision in 13 years. It was a JMX-based way to get stats from, a Java EE implementation. And, a modern perspective on this would use a REST API, and it would look a lot like microprofile metrics, for example. Is this something that we need to be migrating from javax to Jakarta? Is there enough value there that it's worth explaining and talking about again, or do we just leave it where it is? Another specification, which is definitely legacy, is JSR 101, the JavaXML RPC package. Proposed in 2000, released in 2002, it largely reflects the industry's first attempt at SOAP services and was immediately deprecated by JaxWS in 2005, and since is based, that was 13 years ago, and JaxWS has been the dominant way to do SOAP for Java EE in the last 13 years. If you're using SOAP in Java EE, it is probably JaxWS. If you have any old JaxRPC APIs, what's the justification for us making you change that code, right? Is there a justification there? What value do we create for you by having us move that code and you have to spend effort in updating it? You're not going to be writing more applications in that. You're going to be using JaxWS if you are using SOAP. So do we need to migrate this API, or do we leave it calmly, fine, frozen the way it is? Another, and the fourth and last API that I'm going to talk about is Java XML Registry. This is JSR 93. It's also another very, very old API. It was only developed for 1.5 years. So it was proposed in 2001, received 1.5 years of our attention, released in 2003. And after that 1.5 years of initial push, it wasn't touched, not even for maintenance releases, for 17 years. Its goal was to try and create an API that would allow tools and us all to create an ecosystem around UDDI and things like that, which is basically a way to register SOAP services in a central location so they can be discovered and looked up. That industry never really formed, and argue that if there is any implementation of a tool out there that leverages this API, it is 17 years old and would likely be broken and forever lost if we were to migrate this API. So changing the package of this particular spec would likely result in the death of any implementations that are leveraging this. And so, you know, if we do think that this thing has any value, our best thing for it is probably to leave it where it is. And so, you know, that is a very critical data point. We can't just simply go, everything's got to be changed. So I think the summary of this is that Big Bang versus incremental is not the most important part of the discussion. It is an important part of the discussion, and the concept of Big Bang is we're not going to keep moving things over and over and over again for the next 20 years. We're going to make a decision now, and we're going to stick to it. But that decision doesn't necessarily mean we have to or should move everything. We do have legacy we need to talk about. So we need to audit each spec's relevance and figure out, is this something that needs to be expanded and improved, in which case it should move into Jakarta, or is it fine as it is and maybe we just leave it in javax and it can still be part of the platform, but we do not intend to migrate, to update this thing ever. Also, you know, people say Java EE is large and too big. If we don't want them saying that about Jakarta EE, now is the time to address our size. Are there some things that we have control over, that are specifications under Jakarta EE, that maybe we just want to let them sit there and slowly phase them out? In which case, if we plan to phase them out, we should definitely not move them to the Jakarta namespace, because that's a land grab against the future of what we can do. Think of namespaces as domain names, right? They have value. Do we want to occupy the Jakarta namespace with a bunch of things we think are legacy and are not going anywhere? Or do we want to leave the Jakarta namespace for the things which are definitely relevant, even a little relevant, and you know, new things, but certain things that are very, very legacy and old, maybe they just stay there in the javax namespace and not move forward. So that's the summary of it. So you know, that's all I have prepared for this. I do believe that we need to facilitate this conversation better. When we get through the Jakarta EE 8 conversation, you know, deliverables, I'm sure we have to come back and spend some time here and actually talk about each specification. But that's the update right for now.
Hey, David, there are 2 questions in the chat.
Sure.
If you want to address them now.
It's difficult to read the chat when your screen's sharing.
Let me do that for you. So from John Klingon, is the approach that you're recommending deprecating those 4 specs in Jakarta EE 8 and dropping them in Jakarta EE 9? And then comment drop or make optional too?
I would recommend that we definitely do not. So say that question again, Ro, just to make sure I got the first part of the sentence, the first sentence.
So is the approach you're recommending deprecating those 4 specs in Jakarta EE 8 and dropping them in Jakarta EE 9?
I would definitely recommend deprecating javax management J2EE because it's not used anywhere, and JaxR, the last one we showed. JaxRPC is already deprecated. And that's kind of a good point to note, is that because it's already deprecated, why would we move it to Jakarta? And then that leaves the javax enterprise deploy package, and deprecating that is has always been impossible because the TCK uses it to do all the deploys. And so we could say it's deprecated, but in fact, we would all still have to support it until it's replaced. Three of the four, yes, and one of those three is already deprecated, and the fourth is not able to be deprecated. But I do believe that none of the four should be moved into the Jakarta namespace. They don't provide enough value to occupy, our future namespace. What was the second question?
So let me now see, the chat is now going on.
And if people are on the call, you can go off mute and ask.
Martin, do you want to unmute and ask the questions? So there was also comments on the terminology, whether to make, dropping APIs or make them optional or pruning. So this is something that definitely requires wider discussion and some more organized way of collecting input. But Martin, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can. So basically, I'm asking, how would you suggest that we could audit each spec's relevance?
I think, there's 34 specifications. There's 34 packages, Java packages. And, I think what we need to do is kind of divide and conquer, get people to write up. We need to do an analysis of how long it's been since some of these have changed. I would like to do a binary level analysis, because in the JCP process, a lot of these things have received maintenance updates to change text in the specification and things like that. But at a binary level, the API has stopped moving at a certain date. What is that date? And so, getting some help analyzing when was the last time we saw the method signatures of this API change. That's an important thing to know. So one of the things that could be done is to take these 34 packages that are under our control and, do a binary diff. Did this thing change between, Java EE 8 and Java EE 7, Java EE 7 versus Java EE 6, 5, 4, so on, and figure out, okay, well, this one hasn't been updated for 17 years. Is there any value in it anymore? Doesn't matter if people are using it, but is there any value of it to be, moved to the Jakarta namespace? So, that would be something that if people are, if someone is willing to help do a binary diff, let's coordinate on the Jakarta EE platform list and figure out how to get that done. We're collecting a lot of data there in the Jakarta EE platform project. On the namespace transition, there's a dependency tree that's there. People have contributed graphs based upon that dependency information. So I think this is a data point that we haven't collected that we do need to collect. So that would be, one way to really get a new piece of information into this conversation that can help us all decide, is this legacy or not?
Yeah, thank you. I fully agree. Like, these specs are older than my career. So some way how to really separate these would be necessary. But I think that this is orthogonal to the Big Bang versus incremental question.
You're right. So Big Bang versus incremental. Big Bang, if we all decided tomorrow we're going to do Big Bang, if you look at the description of Big Bang, it says, okay, now the follow-on discussion is, what do we want to migrate and what we want to leave there in JavaX? And then obviously with incremental, we're having the same conversation, but we're having a conversation from we want to change as little as possible from JavaX to Jakarta. And Big Bang is sort of, we want to change as much as possible minus the things that are legacy. So they both involve the same conversation. And the conversation of is orthogonal to Big Bang. And even if you are thinking in a Big Bang or incremental way, you should still want to have this conversation because it's relevant to either.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, David.
Okay.
If there are no more questions immediately, then I'll take over to talk about upcoming conferences we're working on. Let me just try to share my screen. So we are working on preparing 2 conferences. So it's JakartaOne Livestream. I hope you've heard about that one in last couple of months. And also EclipseCon Europe 2019. So a little bit about JakartaOne Livestream. So it is going to be a virtual one-day conference that is dedicated to cloud native topics, and in particular Jakarta EE, Java EE microprofile. The date is the September 10th, 2019, and I will show you the website we're continuously working on. This is it's right now open for registration. We basically want to get a sense of, draw people's attention and get a sense of how many people we will have dialing in on that day. We already had a call for papers, and it was closed on the 15th, so this Monday. We got around a little bit less than 50 talks, and the program committee is now reviewing those talks. What we plan to have is combination of keynote talks, demos, discussions, and we're working on figuring out the schedule, and as soon as we have that, we will publish it on the website as well. Of course, we will be tweeting and asking for your help to spread the word, and hopefully we will make this event a success. So that is pretty much at this point everything I have to share with regards to Jakarta EE, JakartaOne Livestream, and yeah, that would be it. The second conference that we are working on is EclipseCon Europe. It is scheduled for October 21st to the 24th, and it is in Germany, Ludwigsburg. We are going to have I will go to the website again and show you. So here's the website, and here are the details where that you can find. We are also now have a call for papers closed. So far, this was the largest number of talks, submissions in the area of the cloud native. I'll just show you the cloud tracks. So it seems there is definitely a lot of interest, a lot of great talks on this one as well. So the invite is really for you to register and figure out the accommodations, because you know, through the in last few years we're realizing it sells out pretty quickly. So please jump on and register. I would also want to point out that we're working on community related events. So we're going to work and start working very shortly on Jakarta, or I should say, I should call it Cloud Native related Community Day and a Community Evening. I believe we already know the date for the day for both. So Community Day is going to be Monday, and then community evening is planned for Tuesday. So we already had some exchanges on Jakarta EE mailing, community mailing list, and people are eager and interested. Very shortly, we are going to start organizing those, and these community events will be community driven and community organized. Of course, Eclipse Foundation will take part in it. But primarily, this is a community days or events organized for the community. So your feedback and input will be essential here. That is everything I have for the conferences. Any questions or comments? Okay, so if nothing on the conferences, I'm hoping that we can take the rest of the time for other questions. We have people, not just people who presented, but other people very much involved in the Jakarta EE working group and various committees. So we're welcoming questions and discussions on any of the topics. Nothing? Let me just quickly see the chat if there are some questions. I don't think we had any there.
Hello, Tanja, this is Edwin.
Hey, Edwin.
Hi. I have maybe a question about EclipseCon now there is time. What if I register and then later get accepted as a speaker?
So I don't know the exact answer, but if that happens, then we'll, you know, you can contact us. To start with, you can contact me and we'll figure it out.
Okay, so that will be great. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
I have a question for people if no one has any questions.
Please, go ahead.
Is there something in particular that people would like to see in this call that you think maybe isn't getting discussed or covered?
You know, silence doesn't mean that we're happy. And once again, this is Amelia, everyone. Some users also here. When I see people being silent, it means or there are no brains available to provide valuable feedback, or we're just so not care enough that we're like, just run with the flow. What's going to be? Or is something else, guys? Come on, let's do better.
Hi, this is Scott Marlowe. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
One thing that I'm concerned about might come later with Jakarta EE 9, whether we do incremental or big bang, and I don't recall seeing this discussed much. An additional wave, I guess, is when we switch over to the new Jakarta namespace, and there are maybe third-party artifacts or applications out there that are sort of looking at the transition from JavaX to Jakarta namespace, and maybe some of these are, I don't know, some of the some things that we all use. It just it's going to be some of the friction will be some of these projects. Let's just say, I don't know, Eclipse Link or Hibernate or other ones. We'll have some difficulty because it's sort of like a fork for them, and they want to continue with the Jakarta EE 8 namespace and also move into incrementally forward, either big bang or incremental with this other fork. But it it's kind of, yeah, it could be like an additional wave of, that impacts things out of the control of what we've been talking about. So I don't, it's a concern. I don't think we need an action plan per se, but if there is one way that helps that more than the other, I'm not sure. I mean, incremental has less impact, I guess, but from the point of view of these third-party jars, I don't really know which is better. And if others have opinions on that, I'd be interested.
Yeah, I know that I was trying to give a little space for other people to chime in before I came bubbling in. I know that like you're right, there's going to be impact on communities around the Jakarta EE community. There's going to be impact in the Spring community. It's going to be impact in Drop Wizard, and basically anybody who uses these types of APIs in their, competitive platform. Right? There's a lot of people who have platforms that are kind of competitors to Jakarta EE in a lot of way, but they still use some of the APIs that are developed under the Jakarta EE umbrella, former Java EE umbrella. And they're going to be impacted. And you hit the nail on the head when you said the word fork, because they may decide not to migrate to the new API. And what happens then, right? And that does kind of raise a question of what do we collectively want to do? Now, obviously, they don't have to migrate. It doesn't mean anything to us, particularly if they don't migrate. We know we are going to have to create migration tools regardless. And so, that's up to them. It is an aspect of the puzzle, and I would really like to hear from those people in this discussion. I have a little bit of nervous energy that we're only hearing from the Jakarta EE people, like the true Jakarta EE people, and we need to be hearing from like the whole industry. So I would like to hear more voices in the discussion that we're having around the namespace, because we're not the only ones affected.
David, question.
Yep, go ahead.
Like you said, we are going to prune, drop, remove, or deprecate some obsolete specifications from the platform. That will mean that we break backwards compatibility, right?
Well, so I want to be clear that maybe we need to introduce a new word. I used freeze. So there is the opportunity that it stays in the platform and is supported. It's just simply still in the javax namespace. So we do have the option to take specifications, leave them in the full profile. They're just not going to be migrated from javax to Jakarta. That's an option, right? So in which case, we're not breaking any backwards compatibility. The backwards compatibility of them stays, and we simply don't have any compatibility tool requirements for those legacy APIs, if you follow me.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so go ahead.
It also means then, if you're talking about profiles again, in the full profile, if they use obsolete specifications, that we always drag them along, right? So if they stay in the full profile, that for example, all the application servers that are going to migrate with the evolution of the platform have to drag these along. So is that I don't know if that's going to be a problem. I don't think the discussion about Java EE or Jakarta EE is big or not, because Spring Framework is also big. I don't know if it's going to be a problem, but when will be the point that we can decide in a nice way to drop things that we really don't use anymore in new applications, and still can support the old ones. So maybe profiles is the answer, but
yeah. So the concept of actually deprecating thing is somewhat orthogonal to the "do we move it or not" concept, but just to address how we've handled deprecation in the past is typically it's made optional, and the platforms that have customers using that old API will typically still support it, and others who don't will often drop it. And so JAX RPC and CMP are two examples that were made optional in the last version of Java EE. And I think we have some typing going on there, so maybe everybody can mute. But anyway, so CMP and JAX RPC were made optional. For example, on the OpenEJB side of the fence in Apache, we still support CMP because we wrote our C implementation on top of JPA, so there isn't really any legacy there for us to get rid of. But yeah, in Jakarta EE 9 and 10, we could continue to make more things optional, which is a slightly different topic than should the namespace be migrated or not.
Yeah, true.
Thank you. So as we're approaching, we probably can squeeze another question, but as we're approaching top of the hour, I just want to invite people to use the document that Amelia started and leave suggestions in that document how we can improve this meeting. You can also leave questions that you would like to be answered. But we would appreciate if and maybe that will be easier way to collect feedback after each meeting to invite people to actually let us know how we can improve the calls.
I will, because John Klingen is on vacation and also not able to speak, I will ask his question. Java EE 9 thoughts and plans, because we're working in Java 8 before Eclipse, and what's going on with that? That is his question.
So do we have any answers or comments on that one? Okay, so we can definitely use that one for our next call.
There are some thoughts about what's going to be in Jakarta E9 in the GitHub space. So maybe if anyone is interested, you can look there for starters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I would add that the JaxRS community is definitely doing work. And so there's probably a handful of communities out there that are actively working on the next revision of their spec, maybe like 2-3 range. I know there are a lot of ideas on what could happen, but I think everyone's so focused right now on Jakarta EE 8 getting that out the door that it's a little bit difficult to think about EE 9. We were thinking about EE 9 like a month and a half ago, but like this week and next, we have to get all 34 specifications up for vote and make all the namespace, all the branding changes that are required. And so everyone's basically heads down. But I think maybe next month or the month after that, is probably the great time to start talking about what do we want to do for Jakarta EE 9. So 8 will be out the door within the next 2 months here, hopefully, so or before September, in September.
Yeah, it has to, right?
Yeah, right. So basically, we'll be having this conversation in full swing in sometime in September.
I'm looking forward to it.
So as we're at the top of the hour, I would like to thank everyone for joining and participating, and we'll talk again next month.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, bye.
Check on the status of those C queues. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay.
Go ahead, start the call up.
Yeah. Yep.
What's going on?